Just a heads up that this episode features some cursing, so keep that in mind and enjoy the episode.
You're listening to a Comics XF podcast.
X-Men. Get it!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Battle of the Atom. This is your weekly X-Men podcast where we rank every story from A to Z.
I'm Adam.
And I'm the bad boy of X-Men podcasting, Zach. Hey everybody, how we doing today? We having a good time? Adam, you having a good time?
I mean, as best as can be considered, but, you know, I'm feeling magnetically charged. I'm ready to talk about this set of stories, and we're not doing this week alone, Zach. We have an epic crossover.
You know what? I'm excited too. We're on that road. We're on that road to 1,000 stories, and you know what? We figured that we shouldn't just walk that road alone. So we brought in somebody to help us drive across that finish line there, get us real close, get us all the way up to 9.99 today. You may know him from the podcast Cerebro. It is Connor Goldsmith. Hey, Connor.
Hi, everybody. It's Sweeps Week, bitch. Get excited.
It very much is.
I'm glad to be here to juice the ratings. And
Thank you.
I'm kidding. I'm just being
It's true.
funny.
That's why you're
Well,
here.
no, that's what...
Okay, but you're not kidding, because that's how I pitched it to you.
That is how you pitched it to me. We're like, we're coming up on 1,000. Can you come juice the ratings? And I was like, I love that exact request. I love to be asked to come assist my
Yes.
friends, you know?
And
Yes.
it is great to have you assist here.
I'm a Pisces. It's my nature. I like to help.
I'd say that tracks, but if anyone says anything about astrology, I just agree.
Well, that's what's fun about it, is that it's a secret language that only women and gay men speak. And so straight men
absolutely.
just sort of look at us and go, what? And I'm like, exactly. It's none of your fucking business.
I just learned that there's like a whole second set of signs. There's like astral, moon sign, sun sign.
Okay,
I don't know.
so your sun sign is the main one that you probably know.
Yeah.
And then the
Yeah.
moon
Right.
sign
The birthday.
is how you process emotions.
Oh.
And then your rising sign is based on the time you were born, and it's how
Okay.
you present yourself to the people around you. So for example, I'm a
Amazing.
Pisces, which is a very sensitive, like sad, kind of creative, but a little bit latently psychic and depressed sign.
Ooh, I like
That's
this.
very anxious. But my rising sign is a Sagittarius, which is an asshole. So I have this sort of like brash exterior, but it's all a front, which is not unlike the young lady we are here to speak about today, Dr.
That is
Lorna
right.
Dane, Polaris.
Yes, PhD.
PhD Lorna.
I wonder
Um,
if Magneto powers could like solve Wi-Fi issues. You know, like it does a lot. So like, you think Polaris could solve some Wi-Fi
I
issues? And-
think that is an appealing idea. It's been suggested by like fans before that Magneto and Polaris could do like internet stuff, and my thing is that they already do like everything with the
They do.
justification that it's magnetism. So I'm kind of an anti-power creep person, and I therefore would prefer not, because here's the thing. If you let Polaris run the internet and you let Polaris do this and you let Polaris do that, then pretty soon, Let's Talk Polaris 616 on X, formerly Twitter, is going to be like screaming at the editors about how Polaris isn't powerful enough in her solo series this month. So you just have to be careful
It's true.
before you let things get too out of hand.
What they
Otherwise,
need to
it
do is
becomes
just
Stan
focus.
armies fighting about which cosmic entity possessing their favorite diva is more powerful, right? So then, like,
Ooh,
it becomes
timely
tricky.
criticism.
I try to be timely. I don't really talk about the current stuff on my show that much, so you know.
I don't either. It's beautiful.
Well, we've been getting our digs in where we can, and you know, we've been gentle.
There's stuff for everyone. Wait, hold
Is
on.
there?
Supposedly,
There's
That's
stuff
the
for a
rumor.
lot of look. No, okay.
Sure,
Here's look. I'll just off the top. Let me just say,
yeah.
most of it's not for me. And I've
Sure.
just become zen with that because the Krakoa era was 5 years of comics that about 90% of them were made for me Amigara Fault style. So like I can't be that upset that now X-Men comics are mostly not for me. And there are occasional things that I'm enjoying. I thought Sentinels was great. I like Eve Ewing's book, although I wish it was more integrated into the rest of the line. There's stuff. NYX is great. You know, it's taking big swings, and I think sometimes the big swing is hard to completely land, but that's why I love Chris Claremont, right? Like I love when we're about to get to a story in this set of 3 that we're looking at where Chris takes a gigantic swing that never goes anywhere. And I, for one, think it's good that he did. And someday, God and Tim Seeley's Savage Land Rogue miniseries willing, I'll get to, resolve this plot. So, we'll see. I have hope and faith in the long-term trajectory of these things. And I think it's okay for not every era to speak directly to you. It is tricky when your job is to talk about the franchise weekly. So I'm glad that my show is monthly and mostly historical, and therefore I don't have to, because frankly I don't like, even when Krakoa was running and I loved it, I don't love talking about current stuff because I just don't feel like that's
starting
smart
to
criticism.
touch it now. We haven't really, we've done quite a few of it, but not like that much. So
Holly Raymond and I are going to do a whole Krakoa revisit on my Patreon now because we're calling it Krakoa Revisited, which is
love it.
But we were just sort of like, now that it's over and you can analyze it as a corpus of work, that feels more fruitful than like, I loved this month's. What do we think is going to happen?
Are you telling me that a week-by-week, page-by-page analysis may not be the best way to consume books in a comic setting? Because some of us may have gotten a little too deep on that for a little bit and needed to like come up for air.
I get that. I think that the reason that I've been able to continue doing my show without going simply insane is that I jump around so much. Like the one I'm editing right now is Lilandra, which she died in 2009. So like I'm not reading anything for that came out in a recent year. And then I just but in the pipeline is Ide Okonkwo, and that's all recent 21st century comics, right? So it's the jumping around that I find fun, and it means that I don't have to be too married to review. I don't really ever want to be reviewing things as they come out. That's just
as someone who is doing that currently with a certain Gail Simone book. I share your opinion, but I'm still I don't know. I'm trying my best. Speaking of jumping around eras,
I have no comment. I love Secret Six.
Speaking of jumping around eras, we are talking about Polaris this week, and we are going to start with her first appearance. So this is X-Men Volume 1, 49 to 52. We are being, I guess, written by Arnold Drake.
Yes.
Starting with pencils by Don Heck, Werner Roth, and then it jumps
and
to
then Steranko
Jim
takes over in the middle.
Yes, for that classic cover.
Love that
Here's
cover.
the thing about these issues. Silver Age X-Men, I would say
bad.
Generally
I think that I actually think this is where it gets good. I think that it genuinely gets good from the introduction of Polaris up through the end with the Xenox. I think all of that stuff, there's some weird shit in there, like the Frankenstein episode or whatever, but like for the most part, I think
it's fun.
And the characters feel, honestly, getting rid of Chuck is the best thing they ever did to this comic, as is true in many cases.
In literally every X-Men comic, everyone brings in like, yes, Charles Xavier, he's the central figure. What do we do with him? Wait, hold on.
Get rid of him because it's better when he's gone. It's a better story. So I like this period where they're like they're college kids now, and like Jean's designed them those hideous costumes. Hers is great, I maintain to this day. The reason people didn't like it on Krakoa is because of the gloves, and I love Pepe Larraz, but the gloves are supposed to be skin tight and sleek. They're not supposed to look like
Not dish gloves.
dishwasher gloves.
Yeah.
No. So
I'm personally a
that's
fan
fine.
of Angel's suspenders look. I do think that's a fun.
I'm a fan
getup.
of Warren in anything except the current run of X Factor. So that's
Oh,
the...
that's rough.
Okay, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah,
That's enough. That's enough.
You're
I'm
not
kidding.
wrong.
If you're listening,
We didn't
I'm
even
like,
needle
no.
you on that one.
If you're no, I'm sorry. I'm just no. I'm it's fine.
So for folks who have not read this arc, this is basically, Polaris kind of showing up. She's got brown hair to start off with, and Bobby bumps into her. And,
just on the street. She's not
just
an
like-
outgoing character.
You
As
gotta
one
give them
does.
some context. The X-Men are in San Francisco because Professor Xavier is dead. So they're
That's
like
correct.
lolling about, being groovy kids, trying to get a job and be in the workplace. Scott's a radio host.
Scott's the radio host.
And Mesmero, a new character also introduced in this issue, is
he
sending
This
out.
issue?
This is his first appearance. Yes.
No way.
That makes
Yes,
sense.
way.
Son of a
Because
gun.
this is
Why does he
Mesmero,
exist?
like, and the Demi-Men, who are following Magneto, who will later be retconned in X-Men 58.
Into a
Into a
robot.
robot.
Be
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
a
a
robot.
robot. Yes, but here he's
But in this
very
story, in
much
the context of this story, it's
convinced
the real Magneto. It's a Zorn
Yes.
thing here, basically, where we have to,
yeah,
in the context of this story, acknowledge that it is Magneto, even if it's going
it
to
is
be
Magneto.
retconned out. It's like how Charles
Yeah.
Xavier did kill all those people in the submarine very recently.
Sure.
Was it a
God.
submarine or a spaceship?
I don't remember. It was
a spaceship, but it doesn't matter.
It was a
'cause
spaceship, but it was
dumb.
the callback to Magneto in the submarine.
yes.
You knew what I meant.
Technically, it was a
You
submarine.
knew what I meant.
I did.
You knew what I
did.
meant.
It's not that I didn't know what you meant. I was trying to remember if I remembered those comics or not.
No. You're right. It was a spaceship. I misspoke because Magneto did it in the submarine, and it was a reference. We're moving on.
We know what
I
we're
was
talking
making
about.
a joke, and now we're moving on because I can only make the jokes if we just move on and don't dwell on them.
I don't know.
here's-
Most of this podcast is dwelling on jokes until they're no longer funny. So
Well, I gotta be honest. That's not a great strategy.
it's why we're number 3, Connor.
I was
Hey.
I was about to say, and that's why you're number 3, but I was like, that's going to come across really mean to your listeners if they don't know that that's like our.
We own it.
No,
we're
that's a
proud,
that's a
and we know
joke.
it's-
That's a bit.
We know
It's true,
yeah.
but it's a bit.
yeah.
But
We've
it's a bit
accepted
that you started, so
That's
know,
right.
it's not me being a bitch. To be clear, okay, so yes, Mesmero. He's working for Magneto. There are these guys called the Demi-Men. Who are they? Doesn't matter. Arnold
Doesn't
Drake,
matter.
I will
Nothing.
say, the script is not the strong suit to these issues. Arnold Drake
no.
is fine, but it's not. It's not as good as other stories in this period might wind up being on a scripting level. In particular, the way that Lorna is tormented by her need to be evil because her father is such a bizarre, and like maybe this is like a 60s values thing that I'm just not picking up on, but I find
It's pretty,
that
it's
peculiar.
pretty odd.
in this
like
story.
he's just like, I'm your dad, and she's like, well, I guess I
She's
got.
like, well, I guess I'm evil, but like,
know?
so I guess, sure. I mean, I sort of massage it with like Mesmero's involved in this whole story.
Yeah, he
so
has
it
mind
seems
control
easy
stuff.
to, yeah.
Yeah,
But anyway, so Mesmero has sent out with the help of his Demi-Men, who are very confusing, and I choose not to look any deeper into them. He sends this wave out across the country that's like, hey, Magneto's back from the dead because he died in an issue of Avengers. Disrespectful, frankly, but it's fine. And now, I mean, I guess Wanda and Pietro are on the Avengers right now, so that's
They
fine,
were on the
because-
Avengers, and let's be honest, Magneto's not a good character yet. It's gonna
Oh,
be.
and
It's gonna be another
and
decade.
X-Men is not a book anybody reads yet, so it's
Yeah.
like really,
Right.
I get it. No, it's fun when we come back and take all their stuff. That's what's fun. When the
Yes.
Shi'ar conquer the Kree, it's like, oh, what now? But so anyway, he sends out this beam. Magneto, king of all mutant kind, needs your help. We've got to reach out and find all the latent mutants. And this is
Right.
before this is actually an interesting, weird step in the middle because it's before Claremont redefines mutation as genetic in the 70s and 80s, But the fact that it's his alleged daughter is clearly meant to evoke an inheritance genetically here, right? So it's kind of in between.
Because for people who weren't like aware of this, and it even gets referenced and like emphasized in backups that run through this and into the next story.
Right, because you see Beast's parents getting irradiated at the nuclear power plant in the backup in this mission.
It was all nuclear stuff. It's going to mutate
the children of the atom. It's mutated
That's
these babies in utero was the premise of Charles's parents worked on the A-bomb. Like that was the whole idea.
Right.
So in this story though, and it's a double twist, so it doesn't really end up being genetic, but the implication is that it's genetic in the case of Lorna, and everyone just sort of goes, oh, sure. So, they weren't quite sure what they wanted to do with it yet. In the actual, like, X-Men comic history, it doesn't become established as genetic until the Proteus arc, when Moira is revealed to be a geneticist in a retcon, because previously she had just been a housekeeper.
With a gun.
Yeah, but like that's the thing that's so charming about going back, because I just did for Lilandra, go back to all those 70s stories, is just watching Chris make it all up as he goes. And like the number of retcons in rapid succession that don't make any sense really when you think about them for too long is just really fun, because he was 25 doing his best here and never thought that 50 years later we would be looking at these like
analyzing these things.
Charles implied he had wronged Moira, but 10 issues from now it'll turn out that Moira dumped Charles. And it's like, yeah, well, it was printed on newsprint and Chris Claremont didn't think you'd be going 10 issues back ever.
Yeah, no one thought you were going back to this stuff. Which I'll tell you, when we talk about going back to stuff, what I go back to is not like the setup for this, the Werner Roth stuff. It's really when Steranko jumps on, because there was a huge like punch in the face when you go from 49 to 50 and you hit that Steranko art.
And I like Werner Roth, honestly, for the most part. I think
a great hand.
Yeah, but he's not a visionary artist in the way that a Jim Steranko or a Neil Adams were. And are.
There's a reason why Steranko's credited with "You Know Who It Is" on
You
his
know
second
who it
issue
is on the second
book.
one. They're like, "Do we have to tell you?" It's funny on the Marvel wiki. They're like, "Presumably that's referring to Jim Steranko." I'm like, "Yeah, you dumb bitch."
Yeah, that's
bless.
him. That's him. Well, and we get not one, but we get two really cool and crazy character designs here, right? So we get Polaris in this original outfit with a very different crown that we're used to.
Yeah, the yellow crown.
We don't get Polaris. We get M2, the daughter.
We get M2. Yes,
that's right.
Chris Claremont names her Polaris much later on.
It's, sorry.
But
that is true.
Which is why John Byrne in the Hidden Years has her try out Magnetrix, because she has to have something that isn't Polaris, and it becomes a running joke where she's like, I'm Magnetrix. And everyone's like, that's so fucking stupid. And but like, she's like, but you can't call me Lorna in front of like the Savage Land mutates. So we have to come up with something.
Right.
Amazing.
And now the new Champions character that's like the little Magneto girl is called Magnetrix, which is a very funny bit from
I
Steve
haven't
Fox.
been following that book.
Okay.
That's good.
Steve Fox named that character Magnetrix, which I think is really that is a gay reference to make to John Byrne's X-Men: The Hidden Years, the Candy Southern showcase of the late 1990s.
Love that. I love that.
But of course, the other one.
Oh no, I'm sorry. What were you? I was trying to get back to the plot, but yes, the other character design. We get good characters.
No, I was going to say the other one, which is absolutely insane, is Bondage Viking Eric the Red, which turns out to be Cyclops in disguise and
in a red Folsom Street Fair costume with a Viking helmet. And
just wild.
Listen. That's a great costume.
It is a great costume.
I mean, again, I just was rereading for Lilandra. Like, the fact that Eric the Red ends up becoming this mainstay character, as Davin Shikari, the inexplicable Shi'ar operative, becomes this, like, enduring X-Men character, it doesn't make any sense.
No.
And Claremont never, ever pays it off. But it's because that Steranko design is so fucking good.
Yeah.
That, like,
it's pretty great.
It's funny that the cover shows a completely different, terrible Viking design that is not what Eric the Red looks like inside the comic.
Yeah, the cover is more like Lederhosen, but he gives a different look to it in the inside. And I've always just liked the idea that...
called... Oh, sorry. Cut
it's
out
okay.
the parts where we do... No, cut out the parts where we crosstalk. I mean,
Yeah.
Because there is a slight lag that now I'm getting, and I'm blaming Zach.
Fair enough.
No, I was just going to say, I'm always amused by the idea that Cyclops just wanders in, convinces Mesmero that and Polaris that he's like, this new disciple of Magneto, and everybody's just like, yeah, okay, sure. He shoots stuff out of his fingers.
Well, also that costume. I mean, it's hard to look at it. Also, like, Lorna's been here, one day? She doesn't know and frankly, he isn't much like Mesmero, which is valid, in my opinion. And she's kind of like, well, this guy's hot. I mean, that's how I read it, is like, he's got his titties out, he's shooting lasers, he's more powerful than her, and she's like, I just got powers, so also I'm pretty conflicted about my evil dad. But to zoom back around just real quick for the first issue, because yes, it mostly doesn't matter. So Mesmero sends out this psychic pulse to lure every latent mutant to his base of operations, which unfortunately for him happens to be near San Francisco, where the X-Men happen to be at this moment.
Right.
One of the people summoned is Lorna Dane, a young woman, a teenager, she's Bobby's age, so about 16, 17, who, as Adam said, has brown hair when she first appears, and she's just sort of walking in a daze through the street and is almost killed by a motorist, but is rescued in the nick of time by Bobby Drake, who then brings her back to his apartment to let her, calm down and take a shower and all that stuff. As my father has pointed out, and pointed out in the Sauron episode of Cerebro, he's always understood that Bobby Drake was gay, because in the 60s, if a girl was taking a shower in your apartment and the character leaves rather than hang out and wait for the girl to come out in the bathrobe, that guy's gay. Because this is like the only moment you get to see the girl you're not married to in a bathrobe, is because you just saved her life and she's going to take a shower. And it's that exact scene, but when she comes out, it's Hank in Beast costume, who's like, shit, well, Bobby's out. We're the X-Men. We're his friends, which is like, Hank, you're supposed to be a genius, but like, whatever. When Lorna does wash her hair, we see that her hair is green, and she says, it's a pretty good dye job, actually, because I mean, for but for washout dye to cover green with like a chestnut brown is pretty impressive. That's like some, Stark Industries tech or something, because that's not really how it's got to be like whatever Betsy used in the Asian years to dye Conan's hair purple like that so consistently while like on the run from Sentinels, because purple's tough when you're blonde, and she suddenly was very brunette and had to get that purple popping every month on the dot, and you know what, good for her. All that to say, yeah, so the X-Men are like, all right, we're going to go out and see what's what, and we'll leave Iceman here with you because he's just as good a guy as Bobby, Lorna. And I'm like, guys, whatever. Okay, fine. So they leave Iceman in Bobby's apartment with Lorna, and then they are immediately kidnapped by the Demi-Men because, of course, it turns out Lorna is, of all the latent mutants they've summoned to San Francisco, the one they are most interested in. She is the prophesied one who is the daughter of Magneto.
Who's making these prophecies?
I want to know that, too, because Irene doesn't exist yet. Mesmero doesn't see the future.
Mesmero's got this big underground, like, culture of demi-men, and Magneto's there, and none of that's ever laid out. It's just...
No.
It's like Stranger wanted to draw some Kirby stuff, so they just let him go and said, we'll write the plot afterwards.
And thank God for that, because honestly, the thing that's given Lorna more staying power than anything else as a character probably is this Jack Kirby-ass design that Jim Steranko gives her, because it was so striking and so different from like the mod 60s look that all the other characters in this book had. That she immediately stands. She looks almost like a Conan character or something, kind of.
Yeah, for sure.
With the skull and the laced up.
Yeah, with the skull and the crown and the sandals that like lace up around her tights, which is kind of bizarre, but I like it. this outfit has been modified and is immediately modified in the times. They take the yellow parts out pretty quickly and make them a different shade of green. But I like it in this first look, in this first appearance of it, particularly because she looks so crazy the whole time. And first of all, that sets the tone for like, and you know, for your listeners who may not know me very well, I love Lorna Dane. That's why we're here today. I am a Lorna Dane enthusiast in a way that few people are. She's a character with a pretty spotty publication history. She did win the X-Men vote that first year, but I think that was in part because she had appeared on television recently. So it's hard to gauge.
Show that I still have not finished.
It's not very good, but the one really good part of it was
Polaris.
that actor.
Yep.
Yeah, who they just changed their name, and I can't remember what their new name is, so I'm not going to say, but they were very good in that show.
I will go to bat for Skylar Samuels as the Cuckoo.
That was good casting. Yeah, I mean, she's always good. They just didn't get to do much, you know what I mean?
They got to speak in unison.
And like
That's
Amy Acker is
wanted.
one of the best actors in television, but they made her Fenris's human mom. So, you know, in like a show with Sage in it, where Amy Acker could have been Sage, but then wasn't.
Wild choices.
Anyway,
that's the gifted for folks who don't know.
Yes, it's about Fenris and Reva Page, which is wild and
strange.
The Fox X-Men franchise was a tale of strange choices.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of.
We'll get into that later. Polaris.
But so I love her, but my point is just she's crazy. She's a crazy person.
Right.
The thing about Polaris is because she's so infrequently a regular cast member, and because different writers had vastly different ideas of what to do with her, she has been mind controlled, mesmerized. In this first appearance, she is mesmerized and then zapped with an evil device that gives her magnetic powers that activates her latent mutation, because the green hair was all she had before they put her in the machine. And then, you know, so she's constantly having her brain fucked with. And her most consistent characterization in more recent years, after Chuck Austin's frankly iconic take on her that I have argued in favor of to some extent retrospectively. I think that it like many Chuck Austin stories, I think that it hits like a sledgehammer, but has a lot of interesting ideas.
Chuck Austin's not boring.
He's certainly not lacking
never
in
boring.
ideas.
Never boring. You're never bored for a second. The Draco, not boring is not the word you could ever use to describe.
And I've used a lot of words to describe the Draco.
Well, and you guys have ranked it as one of the worst X-Men stories of all time, which is true. However, the B plot about Polaris is great. That's the whole reveal of the genocide of Genosha and her witnessing it and her surviving and her trying to kill Nurse Annie because she's having like a psychotic break about everything. And then Charles goes into her head.
It's been like 5 years since I've read the Draco.
I get it, but I'm saying I'm just saying it is absolutely crazy that the Draco is happening, and then the B plot is the stuff that every Polaris story afterward is now based on, which is just an interesting thing. But the point is, she's going to, in the future, be a person of unstable mental stability, right? And I, as a crazy person myself, quite like that about Polaris. I like that she's never, apart from like one Peter David story that I really don't like, fixed. Like it's never like you can just cure this. It's like, no, she's like mentally unwell and like she's doing her best, but you know, it is what it is. And so the Steranko stuff, when she's first been transformed into M2, Queen of All Mutants, is like the way that he does her eyes, like she looks crazy. It's very it reminds me of Black Sunday, the 60s horror movie. Like it's that kind of like
it's
a lot
of like,
it's
a lot of what like Ditko would do with his characters, like his Doctor Strange stuff, where it was making people just like weird and unsettling looking.
Yeah.
Well, and we're getting that dynamic of Magneto wanting Polaris to either use as a pawn or someone to help him increase his power. We'll see that in another story that we're going to talk about later today.
That's why I liked the pairing of these three, because I think that what they establish about Lorna and what is established in this first story is that she is latent, raw potential. And I think that she has the capacity to be as powerful as her father, but she isn't. And whether that's because she's holding something back or because she won't release herself because she won't allow herself to lose control, whatever it is, it holds her back to some extent, in the same way that, for example, Cable is as powerful theoretically as Nate Gray, but the techno-organic virus is a limiter on that
holding
ability.
him back.
Like, I'm fine with Lorna not being an Omega level mutant by the Krakoa measurements, because I think she has imposed that upon herself to some extent. And I think that what you see in these three stories is the idea that if she could just let go, or if she did give herself over entirely to her father or someone else who was trying to control her, she could be a deeply dangerous source of power in this universe. And that's something Steranko really sells here. Every time she does something power-wise in this issue, it looks huge in a way that female characters typically were not at this time in Silver Age Marvel Comics. Wanda at this point in comics is still pointing at things and making like vases fall and hit people in the head.
Well, even Jean here is flipping capes.
Jean is dotted line girl still. Like, you know, not in the Invisible Woman dotted line girl sense, but in the, or I'm sorry, back then in the 60s, Invisible Girl. More here, the like, I've got little dotted lines coming out of my head and they help me like pick up things and like throw them at the bad guy. She's only just become telepathic in like the previous run of issues after Charles died. Right. So Lorna is a real gauntlet thrower. I mean, it's no surprise to me that as an intern at Marvel, before he ever wrote X-Men, the character, besides Jean, who he thought had potential but needed to be fixed, which he then did, the character that Chris Claremont was most intrigued by in this franchise was Lorna Dane. He is the one who suggested to Len Wein the mutant circuit with Storm and Polaris in Giant Size X-Men that is what saves the day, because he was like, these are the two most powerful characters on this team, very obviously.
Well, even in this story, you get all the her being a good guy or bad guy. Oh no, she's terrible, dangerous powers, but she's also the one that saves the day at the end of this. She
repeatedly,
eventually, after
like
the Eric the Red stuff
rescues
shows up,
after Eric the Red shows up, and she, after Bobby goes and talks to her adoptive parents and finds out that Magneto isn't her father. Which, guys, if you're listening and you're like, but he is, that's a retcon that happens actually under Chuck Austen. And I do think that overall in the long term, especially because they fucked up the Wanda and Pietro stuff so much.
Yeah.
The fact that now she is his daughter, I think works. In the original story, the point was that she's not his daughter. She has the same latent power. And so he is trying to manipulate her into believing that she is his daughter so that he can exploit her.
I think it works better that she is now, though.
It does work better now that she is, especially because Wanda and Pietro are not his biological.
I had to look it up because of the Wanda and Pietro stuff. I was like, am I right? I think I'm right. I think I know this story.
She is now his only biological child besides Zaladane, Queen of the Sun People. But
we'll get to it.
Is something we'll have to get to another. I'm worried I'm worried Tim Seeley is going to like kibosh that in this Savage Land Rogue miniseries. And Tim, I'm loving it so far. Just don't touch it. Just don't touch it. Let me touch it in 10 years. Let me do it. Let me do the Dane Curse Part 3. It'll kill.
We will get to the Dane Curse. We will get to the Dane Curse.
We will.
Before we do that,
yes, right. This story, we need to rank this story, which is good, I think.
Yes. Connor, you have brought up exactly what we do on this podcast. In fact, we rank X-Men comics from best to worst.
I'm looking at your crazy list, trying to decide where it should go.
The list is very much a moment in time. It is what we were feeling that day.
Right.
And
I get
we
that.
fight with ourselves frequently on this. And you know what? When we've done 996 X-Men stories on this list so far, you're gonna have a mix.
I get that.
Give us some examples, Zach.
Oh, some examples? I can give you some examples, Adam. Like at number 1, we have House of X Powers of 10. At number 300, we have Kitty Pryde and Wolverine, the miniseries that is now getting a sequel miniseries.
rough.
Sure, why
Yeah,
not?
it is.
Claremont.
As it should.
Number 600.
I love these Chris
ahead.
Claremont nostalgia minis. They should let him write them until the day he dies. Like he should be 150 writing these things as
Seems
long as
to be
they're
what's
set
happening.
in the 80s. Like
Yeah.
I love just him gilding his own lily over and over again. I think it's
You
delicious.
say set in the 80s, but I know you enjoyed the Extreme X-Men one.
Okay, sure. No, but I mean setting one of his runs. Like as long as he doesn't have to coordinate with anybody else on a current storyline, I'm having a blast. I love the Extreme X-Men one. That was hysterical.
We definitely don't need
the
Chris
Paragon Collection Days of Future Past prequel with Bloody Bess. I like every wild thing Chris has done in the last 5 years or so. But anyway, I digress. Where would your list pick a marker for us to start with, I suppose?
Well, we mentioned 300's Kitty Pryde Wolverine. At 600, just for the folks at home who may not have this list in front of them, that's Uncanny X-Men. That's the start of the Cullen Bunn run, Survival of the Fittest. At 900, we have X-Men and the Micronauts. And the worst X-Men comic
harsh on X-Men and the Micronauts. Not that X-Men and the Micronauts is great.
Stuff. I didn't enjoy X-Men and the Micronauts.
Sure. I'm not saying it's great.
I'm not a Bill Mantlo guy. I'm really not.
Oh, okay. No, let's stop there because honestly, I'm not jokes about Bill Mantlo don't feel good.
I don't want to do anything Beyonce, just not my flavor.
Fair enough. I very recently have been deep in the Alpha Flight mines, and it has made me develop a bold new also the Romnibus is out. That's much stronger Bill Mantlo work.
Agreed.
Listen, the Romnibus may change everything for me. I have to.
Yeah, you got to read the Romnibus
to get through this. Worst X-Men comic of all time, by the way, on our list. 2099 World of Tomorrow, a truly horrific thing that was
an abomination.
I have never read that, and I find it hard to believe it's worse than Phantom X Max. So it has to be really bad.
It's really bad, Connor. Don't touch it.
Part of it's because I have an insane love for X-Men 2099, but also
that is a problem for you.
It's a problem for so many people, and I get it.
It's
Steve Orlando and I talk about this all the time. I understand that people love 2099. It never came to me at that moment, and so I have no real nostalgia for it. But I understand.
There's a man named Skullfire
whose
whose skull is on fire. You have to.
And he's not a Ghost Rider.
Whereas that's not. If you were going to try to sell me, you would have talked about
that's not selling.
or Crystalline.
La Lunateca is what you sell. Yes.
Or Cerebro, who's just Tessa before Tessa was Sage. But it is what it is. I actually think Cerebro would have been a better code name for Tessa, but that's neither here nor there.
We all digress. I'd say at 486 right now, we have the first Havoc arc, which also has that second Sentinels thing.
That's a great call because this is better than that one, than the Havoc arc with the living monolith. Yes, which I also like, but this is better.
Neil Adams' art in that is great.
Gorgeous.
The living monolith is
sucks.
Not.
Yeah.
Never been good.
Although it is deliciously homoerotic. Like the living monolith wants to bang Alex Summers so hard, and I appreciate that element of it, but it's not great comics.
I would say
certainly
about 20 spots up from this is Dark Reign the List Wolverine, the comic where Wolverine and Phantom X stop something with the power of atheism. And I do think this is better than that.
This is better than that. I would now going up more. This is certainly better than Death of X at 581. Or are we already above that?
Yeah, we're above that.
We're above that. We're in the fourth. Okay,
that's right. I went 100 down. I'm sorry. My bad.
You're
okay. Now I'm up in the threes.
I'm gonna put a limit on this, and I imagine this is going to be one that you disagree with, Connor.
Okay.
I think that the Wolverine story where he fights a sentient pile of cocaine is better than this. That's at 391.
That is you drive a hard bargain. It's certainly, here's what I'll say. Long Shot by Annie Nocenti, if that's what you have at 393, is certainly better than this. Is that Annie's Long Shot?
That is Annie's Long Shot.
And so is I Magneto at 398.
There's a lot in Long
Here
Shot.
Comes Tomorrow is 397. You guys are sick. Okay.
Here comes.
Here's us.
I love Here Comes Tomorrow.
Okay,
Here Comes Tomorrow has some
okay.
structural issues.
How do
That's
we
all.
feel about it?
Only because it was supposed to be 10 issues instead of 4. It's still pretty
Agreed,
fucking good.
agreed, but we only got the 4.
How do we
I was
feel about
thinking
it
Here Comes
compared?
Tomorrow earlier today.
I love them. I love them.
How do we feel about it compared to Bizarre Adventures 27, where Jean Grey turns into a mermaid?
This is better than Bizarre Adventures 27, which I do like.
All right, so
But
we're
this is
in
better.
between 398 and 402. So
I would say that Germ-Free Generation is better than this.
Okay, this
right.
can be 402 then.
great.
So,
Our new
yeah, that works for me.
402 is X-Men Volume 1, 49 to 52. We are going to fast forward a little bit here in time to the Chris Claremont Australia Outback era and cover Uncanny X-Men 249 to 250. So we've got Claremont writing. Mark Silvestri is penciling both of these. Dan Green inks 249, and on 250 we have finishes by Steve Leialoha.
They look very different, don't they? It's interesting
sure
to see
does.
on flats just how much the ink really does affect. I love both these issues. I love both those inkers, and I love Mark Silvestri. This is my favorite period of Claremont Uncanny X-Men visually.
Is it really?
Yes,
Oh, I love
I
the
am a
Austin era.
Silvestri. I am a Silvestri head.
Yeah.
I love Paul Smith. Ramita is great. I think John Byrne does beautiful work on X-Men. I think Dave Cockrum early on does beautiful work on X-Men. For my money, Mark Silvestri followed the mutants through Inferno into the Siege Perilous is the most. He and Chris, to me, it's like Chris and Alan Davis on Excalibur.
Right.
It's just like a real mind meld
Yeah.
in terms of what they're trying to do. I think Silvestri's emphasis on female forms, but specifically in a way that's not like they are sexy, but it's not ever. It's not like, I mean, later on he'll do Witchblade, right? And it's never Witchblade.
It's not Witchblade
in these comics, you know. It's a more subdued. They look more like fashion illustrations.
Yes.
It's actually. It reminds me a little bit of like Naoko Takeuchi's work on Sailor Moon, where like she was a fashion design person, and it like has a lot of that quality with like the long limbs
Yep.
and the streetwear that he designs for all these characters, like the mall issue where all of the X-women get dressed up in all these amazing outfits. It really made the book feel alive in a way that's different from your standard superhero title.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, all right. So at this point in time, we think that Storm has been killed. So our X-Men are just Psylocke, Colossus, Dazzler, and Havoc. Polaris
and
is
Wolverine, but Wolverine's like
Wolverine, but
hanging
he's on a walkabout, so
yeah,
don't worry about him right
he's
now.
off panel. He'll show up nailed to an X in.
He'll show up
in
after the other
251.
ones have left. It's they have to be ships in the night for the story to work.
Yeah.
Right.
So Polaris has been possessed by Malice, but Malice's powers
for years now.
seem
point.
to be
It's
wearing
been-
off. At the
because
same
Mr.
time,
Sinister was killed at the end of Inferno, apparently.
He got blown up into bones.
Yeah, and so she was connected to Mr. Sinister, so apparently Lorna is now getting control of her mind back, and she manages to place a call to Alex in the Outback.
Yes. So
I do love that Betsy is just like, I'm going to write a note about this. I don't know this lady. I don't know.
It's
who
Jubilee.
Lorna is.
No,
We've
Jubilee
never-
writes
yeah,
the note.
Jubilee writes the note.
That's,
and
that's
wait,
not revealed in
they
this
don't know that
issue.
Jubilee
So
is there yet.
That's right.
They don't know. They don't know Jubilee is stowing away in the
Yeah.
base because she snuck in through the gateway portal in the mall issue. She ends up hiding in the base until they're all gone through the Siege Perilous and Wolverine comes back, and she's the one who rescues Wolverine from the Reaver Cross.
Yep.
But she's the one who takes the message and writes it down, which is why when Betsy walks in her lingerie, it's Alex, which is her favorite activity. She I love Betsy writing so much. She's like, oh, hello, I'm sorry, were you trying to sleep? I'm here in my little teddy in a nightie, and I'm going to be mean to you because that's what Summers boys like. He's like, who left this note? And she's like, well, not me. I don't take dictation. She doesn't say that, but it's sort of implied.
She doesn't. She just looks at the note, and I read that without remembering the Jubilee thing as Betsy being like, you idiot. There's like 4 of us.
I took no. No, Betsy doesn't write notes, but what she does do is immediately take control of the X-Men once Storm is dead, which I think is really funny.
Immediately.
Yes.
And
Well,
Havoc
what are
is
they gonna
pissed
do?
about it. He's like, who made you leader? She's like, do you see anyone else more qualified? No?
Yeah,
All right.
Havoc's
then I'm on.
drunkenly running around being mad at people. Like, he's just
He's so
crossing
hot
their
in this
names
issue,
off
though.
the table.
Maddie just died, and he's
Yeah, we got to
like,
cut
in
him a little bit of slack.
And he like the reason we think Storm is dead is because Nanny used a clone duplicate body of Storm to trick Alex into believing he, with his uncontrollable plasma blast, killed Storm by
Amazing.
accident. So he's in
I
a
love Nanny.
bad
Good
mood.
job,
yeah.
Nanny.
Oh, this is one of Nanny's first and wiliest schemes. She's busy turning Storm into a 12-year-old up in her spaceship,
Yep.
but that's not relevant to this story.
Wild. So Polaris is actually in Chile, and so
Yes.
Gateway beams them over there at the same time that Zaladane is launching an attack with her Savage
Bunch of Conan the
Reasons.
Barbarians on some chocobos.
So Zaladane and her Chocobo army land in South America because an oil tanker that came out from this harbor had an oil spill and fucked up Antarctica. And as far as Zaladane's concerned, because the High Evolutionary is vacated and Garak the Petrified Man is dead, the Savage Land, and by extension all of Antarctica,
belong
is
to her
kingdom.
That's right.
So,
Which is
fuck
wild,
you.
because Kazar is there. Like,
Oh, but,
he's there.
I mean,
he just
not
had
for
a
long,
baby.
but she's going to enslave him and his ever so sultry wife later in this issue. So, it's not. She doesn't really think that she thinks his claim to the Savage Land is not legitimate, which is funny because, of course, she also is an Outlander because she's Polaris's long lost sister, which is the thing that Claremont reveals in this issue. It is revealed that she has been searching the world over for Lorna Dane, who her minions call Lorna Dane, one word like
Lorna
Zaladane,
Dane.
which I really like.
Right.
Like pretty Lorna Dane, because she needs her for some foul purpose, and when she's mind wiping Lorna with the Black Lotus flower smoke, she's like, "Dear sister," and Alex like, "Sister, what the fuck?" Because we don't know anything about Zaladane besides the fact that she seemed to have come from somewhere else to the Savage Land and become the priestess of Garak. The X-Men have tangled with her a couple times in that capacity. Then Alex met her during the annual when they all had to fight the High Evolutionary, and she was
Right.
introduced there by the High Evolutionary as his lab assistant, Zala. And if you're wondering if my grand theory of Zaladane fixes a lot of the Wanda and Pietro stuff by having the fact that pointing out that she was the High Evolutionary's lab assistant and is Polaris's sister, well, you're on the right track. But
I do think so. I'm gonna put cards on the table. I got nothing for Zaladane. I've never cared about her for 1 second in my life, but I love the passion that you have for her, and the fact that you have force-fed that passion to so many people to the point that
yeah.
Zaladane's here. Zaladane is what we all want now.
I got so many tags. Well, first of all, when I met Tim Slee for the first time at New York Comic Con last year, and I was in my Zaladane t-shirt. He was like, "Oh my God, and I was like, I had to ask, he's like, "She's the bad guy." It's like it's a Zaladane comic. I was like,
great.
Fuck yeah. So we're gonna.
How much do you personally enjoy that Dazzler out of nowhere just walks up and says, "Firstly, bimbo," to Zaladane?
Firstly, bimbo. That's a classic Chris Claremont moment. I also like the bunkies that happen a couple times in here. I love whenever a Claremont woman calls her man lover and puts him in a slutty outfit. I love whenever a Claremont woman pulls a gun and calls someone chum or sweetie. I'm a big fan of all of those nicknames that they spontaneously give each other. But yes, when one female character calls another female character bimbo, it could be seen as catty, except it's funny because it's Dazzler.
Right.
And so Dazzler calling anyone a bimbo is funny because Allie, God love her, and I'm a huge fan. I wouldn't say she's a member of Mensa,
Dazzler.
right?
Right.
Yeah, and she'd be the first to tell you. She's like, my daddy wanted me to go to law school. I wanted to sing. That's sort of her whole deal. It's not that she's stupid, but she's not for book learning. That's not really her way, right?
No.
Did you ever didn't you ever wonder where your mutant powers came from, Dazzler? Nope.
No.
That's what she says to Cyclops in her first appearance. And I'm like, that kind of sums it up.
It's beautiful because this really is at this point, like the Outback team was always a little bit of like the thrown together X-Men that are there, but they have gotten all of the most competent people like out of that team at this point. Storm's gone, Wolverine's not even around. Havoc, I mean, Havoc competent, probably not, but like
Havoc is having specifically a mental breakdown right now because his girlfriend was just revealed to be a demon who isn't real or whatever, according to the story. And, he's in a bad way. He also just killed Storm. So as far as he knows, so it's,
and then on top of
this,
they're going to drag his butt back to the Savage Land only for him to basically watch Zaladane like power suck Polaris and or turn her into like She-Hulk. It's wild.
Well, this is where Chris Claremont pulls a classic Chris Claremont story beat, which is bizarre body transformation gives you cool new powers.
Sure.
What happens in this story, which is 249, the Dane Curse, and 250, the Shattered Star, is the X-Men go and fight Zaladane in Chile, but Zaladane's minion Worm, who is a very Chris Claremont
very masked
creation, whose power, very masked, but like worse somehow.
He's got the Morbius hands from the animated series.
Yeah, but his power is to cover you in slime that freezes, it makes you incapable of moving, and then he puppets your body around and makes you do things, but over time the slime gets inside you and makes you like it.
Ugh.
Which is so gross. It's like the Shadow
gross.
King. Like that. It's like Claremont loves that kind of thing, though, where it's like you let this thing in and now it's corrupting you. I mean, that's Malice with Lorna. When Lorna is trying to call Alex, there's a whole sequence in this because until Teenie Howard revealed that she is a goth teen who accidentally killed herself, named Alice McAllister, which I think is one of the funniest Zaladane type choices. But Chris never explained who Malice was, and here he has her imply to Lorna that they're actually like part of the same whole and that they're meant to be together, and that Lorna's really just talking to herself. And this whole thing where like she's been possessed by this entity is a lie that she's telling herself. Now, Malice is eradicated by Zaladane's power transfer process, so that ends up not mattering. She comes back later in Demeteus X Factor. Okay. Yes, but before that, Demeteus has her come back for a second. Yeah, but she does turn herself into a computer virus that she emails to Omega Sentinel, which I think is very
Emalis.
Emalis, yeah, no, there you go. She becomes a bit of a Trojan. But so they are defeated by Zaladane, who, makes her way back to the Savage Land. But Alex has disguised himself in one of the barbarian costumes of the Chocobo guys. He also immolates a whole bunch of Chocobos in this one point. And Dowser's like, fuck, Alex. And he's like, I don't have a choice. It doesn't have a it doesn't have a stun. I don't have a stun setting. Like, that's not how I work. So they're going to die or not. You pick. Because at this point, I've had it. Which this is all leading into his Siege Perilous transformation into a Genosian magistrate, right? Because his self-loathing becomes that powerful. So this is Chris building up the idea that the real thing about Alex is he hates himself and he's afraid of his
Which is fair.
power.
I get that. That's the most relatable Alex has ever been, honestly.
I love Claremont's Alex. The reason I have so much affection for that character, I mean, it would have to be, right, is because I wouldn't say that he's been covered in glory by many later writers, but I think Claremont's Alex is a very fascinating, human, compelling, likable character despite all of the stupid shit he does. And similarly, Claremont's Betsy, who is drawing on Alan Davis's and before that Alan Moore's Betsy, because Claremont creates Betsy in the 70s, but in only the vaguest sense. The real character as we know her is created by Alan Moore and Alan Davis in Captain Britain in the 80s. The thing about her that I've always loved about her is that she also is like really a fuck up, but wants it so bad, and much like Alex is constantly living in the shadow of her older brother. Though I believe Betsy actually is technically older, but it doesn't matter because they're British.
Well, they also
nobility
have
and they're
another older
twins.
brother that they just try not to talk
Well,
about.
but that we don't. That shadow is one that they're not too eager to revisit. So I just mean there is a superhero brother who is the guy, and you're not the guy. And if you're Betsy, you have instead become a spy, and then and you're a mutant, which Brian isn't. And so there's this sort of idea the whole time with her. She's also just come out of Mojo enslavement and being transformed into the Psylocke by Spiral. So there is, but this is still for the listeners, white Betsy, because this is before
this is right before that.
This is right before.
Hits, but
all of these events that are going to transpire while she is leading the X-Men are what convince her that the only option is to force them all through the Siege Perilous, which she will then pay for by getting body swap for 30 years as her punishment.
Which gets laid on pretty thick in like a psychic vision, a premonition that she has
a vision of the future where
during
when she's being taken over by Worm, Betsy experiences, and this is a beautiful Sylvester sequence that I think about all the time. It's a precognitive vision because Betsy before the body swap was precognitive. That was her original power in Captain Britain in the 70s. She has this vision that is maybe implied to be her precognitive mutant power linking up with Gateway's Dreamtime magic. And what it enables her to see is that if the X-Men remain in their base for the next week, the Reavers are going to kill them all. She sees herself half cyborgified and nailed to a wall as a corpse. It's bad. And this is what will compel her as a last-ditch thing to be like, well, we've got to use the Siege Perilous. But we don't quite get there in this story. At the end of this story, she's like, well, we better stay in the Savage Land with Lorna until I can explain to everyone that we can't go back to Australia. And then they get teleported back to Australia by Gateway automatically. And it's like, well, all right, we're in trouble now. But the precognitive vision was not wrong because they aren't there when the Reavers arrive, and it's Wolverine who's there, and Wolverine does get essentially massacred by the Reavers, but because he's Wolverine, he survives it.
Yeah, he gets nailed up to a wall just like Betsy gets nailed up in this vision.
Yes. So, she was right, but then she does some, perhaps questionable things to
everyone's
get
just
everyone else
on
the same page. But this is what I like about Betsy is she's very decisive. She makes choices and they're often the worst possible choice, but by God, she meant it in that moment. And she will explain it to you logically and you'll be like, I get that. However, my love, I don't know. Anyway, this is not a Betsy episode. We've done that already. Go back to the one we did. It was fun. But so yes, the big thing is that Zaladane has found a machine that the High Evolutionary, her mentor, put together somewhere in the Savage Land in this citadel that she has assumed control over. It has a device in it that when she places Lorna into it and herself into it, enables her to steal Lorna's mutant powers. This is crazy, right? This doesn't really make any sense. In later issues, Moira McTaggart will explain that the only way this could have worked is if Zaladane is in fact Lorna's biological sibling or some other very close relation, because it has to do with their X genes or latent X genes or whatever being closely related. Regardless, it's a magic hand wave. The point is that Chris had decided to bring Lorna back out of her malice, state, but he wanted to change the character up. So he gives her a new power set, which is that she channels emotion and negative energy into becoming a big super strength She-Hulk type person.
So she uses that strength to break off of everything and essentially free everybody. And
that's how it ends, basically. Zaladane, Havoc tries to kill Zaladane, and Zaladane, there's actually a very funny moment where Zaladane hasn't really figured out how the magnetism works yet. So when she gets blasted, she defends herself with a shield, but she doesn't adequately adjust for the inertia or the torque of it, and she goes flying out a window, which I think is really funny. But yeah, so
They
this
blow
is
it
the
all
status
up. They
quo up
save
through
everybody.
the end of the Claremont. This is the status quo up through the end of the Claremont run is that Zaladane has these powers and Lorna has these weird super strength powers up until she winds up on Muir Island for Muir Island Saga.
And it all works itself out. I know there's a lot of Zaladane.
Where did these powers
I
come
like
from?
this.
I think they're Zaladane's latent mutant powers. That's
So
my
she's like
theory.
power swapped.
That she's
Otherwise,
yeah.
well, I think
Okay.
she,
Okay.
like Lorna, needed to be activated by the machine, like
Mm.
like
A
back
lot
in the
of-
60s.
Yeah.
A lot of machine
And then they
activated
swap.
powers in this family.
Well, yeah, I think, and yeah, I mean, Magneto's powers are also often influenced by machines. Also, if Moira's right, just gonna say, if Moira's right, then when Zaladane tries to use the machine again to steal Magneto's powers and almost succeeds, that only could have been
Nice.
possible if she and Magneto are
I
closely
love how much
genetically
you've thought
related.
about this. This is great.
I'm gonna take your
Just
word
putting that
for
out
it.
there. I've had
It's-
to because I didn't even choose her.
Yeah,
She just people
you
thought it
gotta
was so
know.
funny that she's just become the mascot of the show, and now I must now. People have questions, and I am the only person
Yeah.
they expect to be able to answer them. So I must be able to.
Here's my questions about this specific comic. You bring
Yeah.
up the stuff about her or about Zaladane and like Magneto and all the stuff in the Savage Land later. Is this better than that? Because that one's got some Jim Lee.
No, 275 is one of the best issues of Uncanny X-Men there is, in my opinion. And this is 250, which is another. It is, I will say, the fact that Zaladane is the villain of 250 and 275 of Uncanny X-Men, big
Claremont was
moment for
doing
Zaladane. Unfortunately, she
something
dies in
there.
275. And, well, he was going to bring her back. She was going to be part of the upstarts.
Right.
She gets, they create Sienna Blaze
Yeah.
to replace her after
Well-
Claremont's off the book because no one else cared about Zaladane.
I mean,
Besides
listen,
me, I feel you, Chris.
no one's cared for many, many years, and I love when a character gets their moment. I think that's fantastic. I've had plenty of my guys pop back up and get a hit. Glob Herman's had a hell of a run. I'm glad that other folks
Sure
are getting the
has.
spotlight.
Here's
Listen,
what I'll
That's
say about this
representation
story.
for
It's-
flabby guys like me who just really are trying to get by.
Absolutely. Here's what I'll say. It's not as good as 275 because the narration by Magneto in that is so good. But
Mhm.
the narration and just the dialogue, all of the scenes with Alex and Betsy in this, I think are fantastic. And this is all the setup for the moment when she kisses him and telepathically forces him through the Siege Perilous in a couple issues. And again, we're talking about things that pay off later rather than things that happen in these two issues. But I think that this is a real tone setter. You can see where Claremont was planning to take the book. It becomes a very grim book where everyone is split apart and being reshaped at their very core, and they've all just been through hell literally, and they've come out changed and not the people they were. And I think that this is a really strong story. I do not think it's as good as something like 275 that, again, while I prefer
Where is
Sylvester
275 on the list?
is
Zach?
one of Claremont's best scripts. So,
Because at 399 we have
I
the
can't
issues
find it.
that,
I was-
that come
I was
right
trying to
after
search.
this, which
I
is
can't
Fever
find it.
Dream, which I think are better than this. Yeah.
Which is better. That's better.
I
I
can
see slotting it in
but
right
this is
below
better than
that
Trial
because
of
I do think
McCoy.
this is better than the first appearance of Polaris at 402.
It's kind of a run of four. Like these
Yeah.
two into
I
Fever
think that's a
Dream
good
are
spot for
kind
it.
of
So this could be
a
our new
run
400.
directly into each other.
Right.
Yeah.
This can be our new 400. That's a good spot.
I'm fine with that. That's frankly for Zaladane, that's like high tier placement. So I'm always happy for her when that happens. Actually,
good.
I will say, no, that's fine. For only 12 appearances, mostly bangers. That Marvel fanfare where she fucks Sauron, incredible. For the listeners, Adam had to leave for reasons.
Yeah.
So the third story is just going to be us. He's fine. I just run long.
Adam's good. Adam's good. Some members of this podcast, and I'm not going to name any names. Some of us may have forgotten about certain scheduling things and long
Oh,
story
you.
short,
I thought you were going to
No,
blame
it's-
me for going
No,
like already 10 minutes
yes,
over what we had
Why would I blame
scheduled.
you? Why would I blame
I
you?
don't know,
That's
Zach,
not me.
because we talk shit to each other and it's funny. Don't worry about
That's
it.
the thing.
Fine.
The thing that you and I got to be friendly with is because we realized we could be a little mean to each other, and it's going to be okay.
Oh, that's how I am with my friends. But then sometimes people start it up in the comments. I'm like, I don't know you. Don't you?
Right.
You don't get to make fun of my love for Zaladane. Yes. I don't know you like that. No, but so where I feel good about that placement, though. Do you? Are you?
I feel
do you
good.
Feel good to
I
move
feel
on
good
to
about
Seduction?
it, and I want to move on to Dark Seduction. Dark Seduction, kind of the one that when I came to you and it's like I'm thinking you brought up the idea of Polaris, and this was the story that like I think when we were bouncing ideas, this was the one I said yes, we need to do this one.
Because I said, well, you were saying what characters. I was like, well, we could do Polaris, and then you said, what stories do you think? And I said, have you guys done Dark Seduction? Because this is, for my money, one of the best Polaris stories. I think one of the best evil Magneto stories. Like, this is that era where editorial insisted that Magneto be a bad guy, and I think that it kills.
So I think what's interesting about that for folks who don't have the cultural context, because I think with Magneto there is the comics context of it, and the comics context is that for like a decade Magneto was a bad guy. Like he just was. Well, so you could say
really, I'm gonna keep it to bullet points, but Magneto's introduced in the 60s as like the worst guy, like mutant Hitler, basically.
Yes.
Then in the 80s, Chris Claremont does the Holocaust backstory reveal, and this is what twisted him into this person and makes him sympathetic. And then he and Xavier turn out to have been old friends all along, and then he takes over the school and all of that stuff that you're familiar with, where he becomes a good guy. Then in 1991, Bob Harris, or somebody, but I think it was Harris.
It's Bob Harris.
Came down on high.
That's record.
And said that Magneto needed to be a bad guy again, like he was back in the day when Stan and Jack were doing it. Right. So there is a very heavy-handed series of stories that are part of, it would seem to me, why Chris Claremont quit writing X-Men, because he and Harris just could not see eye to eye on any of this stuff.
Right.
But
Claremont at the time has talked about how he didn't want to rehash old stories. He didn't want to do another Sentinel story. He said, I've done that.
He wanted to do something new. He's like, that's over.
Right.
The point of the Siege Perilous was that everything that was the X-Men is over, and now something new is beginning. And the Siege Perilous year was controversial with fans and very controversial with editor Bob Harris, who also didn't like all of the weird sci-fi fantasy shit that Chris Claremont had put into X-Men and wanted to get back to a very Silver Age basic premise of what the X-Men are, or at the very latest, Claremont Cockrum, 78 was where he wanted it to revert to.
Now, I think what really changes, because Magneto's super evil through the 90s.
Through the 90s, he's so evil that they retcon him out of being Jewish for a second because they were worried it would seem anti-Semitic, and they weren't worried about offending Romani people, so they just say that he's bad instead.
That was the world. That is the world.
It still is the world to some extent.
Yeah, it is. What changes really is the same year that this comes out. Magneto Dark Seduction comes out. It's the same year that the X-Men movie comes out. Yes. And when that movie opens with Auschwitz and has Ian McKellen putting on a better performance than that movie deserves, Magneto's never going back.
The first X-Men movie, it became impossible to do an evil Magneto story. And quite honestly, you see it immediately, because what Grant Morrison did in Planet X is 1000% in keeping with the Magneto of Magneto War, the Magneto of Magneto Dark Seduction. It is building on Magneto has become the kind of fascist, racist that destroyed him as a child. That is where the story was going. And the movie reminded everyone of Claremont's more nuanced Magneto, and then Morrison does their story where Magneto is a fascist, racist psychopath, and everyone revolted, the readership, because they were so in part because no one was fucking reading late 90s X-Men. That's why they broke the glass and brought Chris Claremont back. And when that didn't sell enough, they completely relaunched the line with Grant Morrison. And they tried that whole Warren Ellis Counter X thing where like they did it, it was like a Hitler style, like come in and redirect the line. Revolutions with Claremont.
All this was part of that
because the readership was hemorrhaging off X-Men after it had been the biggest book in the world. After Age of Apocalypse, it just starts to sink, and after Onslaught, which I mean, you know, that was a tough sell. Post Onslaught X-Men.
Yes.
So this is smack dab in the middle of there, and this miniseries, it's 4 issues, is a great illustration of why, for my money, the only person writing X-Men comics worth a damn in the back half of the 90s for the most part. There are some exceptions, but pound for pound, Fabian Nicieza. Fabian's stuff in this period. I mean, I love Fabian in general. I have come to really appreciate his early 90s work in a way I didn't as a young person, because X-Force was like more of a boy book in my mind, and I wasn't as into it. But I've reread all of it for my show, and I think it's very good once he's like the writer on it.
Yes. Once when Executioner Song hits, X-Force becomes like a good book.
It becomes the best book in the line for quite some time, I would argue. Okay. Well, that or Davis on Excalibur, but they're like at the same time, basically.
Yep.
No, because Davis is gone. It's by this point, isn't it Lobdell on Excalibur? So that's
okay, wait. Yes, okay. By then, Davis is either gone or just about.
Davis is gone before Phalanx Covenant.
Yes.
So
he's gone before Fatal Attractions.
But that's what I'm saying. He's gone before Fatal Attractions, which is the year before Executioner's Song, right?
No, it's a year after Executioner's Song.
After. It doesn't matter.
Early 90s events don't matter. Magneto was evil in all of them.
Nicieza is great, is the point. Nicieza is really good. This is really good Nicieza comics. This is coming out at the same time as his Gambit solo, which is one of my favorite 90s X-Men comics. That book is great.
We just talked about his Gambit solo 2 weeks ago.
It's why I'm obsessed with the Black Womb Project, which is all Gambit solo stuff. No, but I'm saying like it's because that book is good.
On that episode, I think we made a lot of comments of a lot of people really enjoy this book, not particularly my flavor.
Fair enough.
Just what it is. This
nobody's perfect, Zach, and sometimes you are wrong about things.
Have you seen this list?
Fault.
My tastes are.
I was just making fun of it earlier, so yes.
My tastes are just what they are. So are Adam's. It is. That's the beauty of it.
No, it's fine.
Sometimes there's a little for everybody.
But also, it depends. Like this is also about. I was just talking about this in one of the recent episodes of my show. Squirrel Girl came up, and I was like, "Squirrel Girl, good comic, not for me. Just like not my. It's just not my thing, and that's fine." Like, it's okay if
I heard that, and I wanted to get mad, and I remembered people can have different tastes. It's all right.
Well, but also it's like by not for me, I literally meant it's just not for me. Like what I've read of it, I've been like, this is good. It just it doesn't activate my brain in that way.
In high school, so
right. No, and I think well, and I'm loving what he's doing right now, North. I mean, I think he's great. I think the book, again, when I read it, was good, but I was just like, I don't know, this is like just not really my.
It's not your book. That's
vibe.
Okay.
It's not my vibe.
People can have different tastes.
But like on the other hand, this was in the context of us talking about the sisterhood stuff, the Greg Land, Mad Fraction Insanity, which is objectively terrible comics, but it's undeniably my kind of comics, right? Like it's awful. It's awful, but I'm having a real giggle reading it, you know?
I may be getting Greg Land to sign a copy of one of my issues of the Sisterhood in a couple of months. I already have Fraction sign it. I already have Fraction's signature on one of them because it was a comic that I bought in high school and said, I want to get into X-Men. And then I bought it and it said, I guess I'm not getting into X-Men for a little bit.
Oh, it's so fucking funny. That
it's the Psylocke cover with...
I was so... No, I know. I was so mad about that storyline at the time because of the way it wrote Madeline, who now I've managed to figure out is not the real Madeline, so it's fine, whatever.
Yeah.
But also, the tease of the body swap Psylocke thing being undone to then not do it was so frustrating for me as a Psylocke fan who wanted all along what they've now done, which is swap them back and let them both stick around, which you could do. it was a very frustrating story. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, it's fucking hysterically funny. But we're not here to talk about that.
None
I just
of
noticed
those
it was
characters
toward the
appear
bottom
in
of your
this
list.
comic.
No, they well, Betsy does. Well, no, not in Dark Seduction, actually. So yeah, no one from that comic is in Dark Seduction. Dark Seduction is great, though, is the point that I was trying to make. It's good Fabian Nicias comics. This is coming out of Magneto War, which is terrible comics. Magneto War
Truly horrible.
is. If you want to learn about Magneto War, which I've almost never discussed on my show, which was written allegedly by Alan Davis, but he's like a little bit about that. And
it was written by, it was yes.
Fabian came on to punch up the scripts. So he is coming right out of having scripted that. And this story, actually, Magneto Rex is a miniseries that I guess is between. And this is picking
Magneto
up from
Rex
Magneto
sets
Rex.
up the cabinet. Yeah.
Yeah, Magneto Rex is where the cabinet of the new. So in Magneto War, Magneto almost destroyed the world again. Don't worry about it. But the point is that Dr. Alda Huxley, an human expert on mutants, this character's never really been used again. But I think it's such a fascinating. She's the way she's presented here is kind of like Dark Moira, which like now Moira is Dark Moira, but you get what I'm saying. Is like this idea that like someone who she's sort of a cross between Moira and Valerie Cooper in that she's using it for like a personal bureaucratic gain in her career.
She's trying to set up some sort of Brave New World or some sort of thing here.
Yeah, which perhaps is what she's named after the author of. Right. So there's that. She is the one who convinces the United Nations to give Magneto Genosha as a mutant homeland, because Genosha, as the apartheid South Africa metaphor that it was created as when apartheid South Africa was still happening, and then after the end of apartheid, Genosha goes through its civil war in the comics. By the end of the 90s, the Genosian Civil War had still been raging and was just a really horrible, bloody conflict that, you know, was not going anywhere good. So Dr. Huxley says to the UN, well, why don't you kill two birds with one stone? We give Magneto a mutant homeland for his people on the grounds of this nation that enslaved mutants. It's a symbolic victory for everyone involved, for us, for him. And now the Genosian Civil War is not our problem because it's his problem. And if he's distracted with that, then he's not going to be threatening us with bullshit and nuclear whatever. So
it is a plan.
Feels like a win-win.
It's a plan that she has laid out. I don't know if it's a good one.
Well, okay. Here's what I'll say, and I'm Jewish, so I'm allowed to say this. Ominous beginning to a sentence, I know.
Very ominous. I'm sitting here terrified.
The person at the UN she pitches it to is Gabrielle Haller. And I think that this comic is a very, and I mean, I'm not putting words in Fabian's mouth, but Fabian had written a lot of stuff around this time dealing with these themes. And certainly this is when Cerebro was getting a huge push at Marvel. So the question of Israel and Israel-Palestine is something that's really, I mean, it's the 90s also. We were all talking about Israel-Palestine then in much the same way that we are now. And so I think that there is something very overt in this comic about how Magneto's Romani children come to admonish him for having become the oppressor, because there's a line in this that's like, what's the point of having your paradise if you're so afraid of losing it that you become the thing that you despised? And I don't know, for me, reading that right this moment as a Jew who is not a Zionist, I found that to be it felt very current, is what I'll say. And this comic feels very current. I think it's worth reading. I think it's particularly worth reading for Jewish readers who identify with Magneto in various ways. I think it is the explanation for why Magneto specifically chooses to humiliate the Israeli ambassador at the beginning of House of X. I think that he is saying Genosha was that kind of project, and that kind of project never works. You can't displace other. You can't do it that way. Well, it's not sustainable. Krakoa is different, and that's what that. And Hickman intimated that I was correct in my reading of that scene. But I think that here, where you see him following a plan that Huxley and Gabby Haller lay out to create this mutant Zion, which is, and Genosha's compared to Israel explicitly many times in late 90s and early aughts comics. I think that it's just Nicias is cooking with gas on this one. It's one of those comics that you read now and you're like, it's kind of wild, because you could also read it as a critique of the post-apartheid South African government, which is also, that's a spicy take. You know what I mean? Like whichever, and you could also read it as neither. You can read it as about an entirely fictional situation. But the question it poses about how someone traumatized by slavery and genocide and the murder of their people could... It's one of the best stories that, especially in the 90s, where they were like, you have to go back to 60s Magneto. This is one of the very best stories not written by Chris Claremont that threads the needle between the insane I am the Nazi now Magneto of the 60s and the human Magneto with thoughts that we care about from the 80s. It's just, I think it's really strong. It's also got great Joanna Cargill content, like many Fabian Nicieza stories of this time. It's got great Amelia Vogt content. Great.
So there's
pipeline of the press gang content.
I mean, there is
character I had forgotten never came back, and he's good in this though. And he's an interesting one because he was one of the race traders in apartheid.
Right. He was in the press gang. In
the press gang. So you've got this cabinet really has assembled all of the different factions, including, by the way, Fabian Cortez, the character that Claremont clearly named after Fabian Nicieza as a dig, who is used very interestingly and well in this story.
So I think there are a lot of interesting elements, because like for folks who haven't read this era, and I get it, but Magneto taking over Genosha was not good. There are human camps. There is slave labor. Like, it is not.
He immediately turned it into a pro-mutant apartheid state instead of a pro-human apartheid state. That was literally and that's why I'm saying that the thing that's very spicy here is the way that it is sort of rendered opposite Gabriel Haller as the Israeli ambassador to the UN. And there is an implication made here that if the way that you choose to reform the society is by flipping who is oppressing who, that isn't fixing the intrinsic problem with the situation, right?
Two wrongs don't make a right.
Correct.
Kind of situation
and
there.
So there, and I think it's really smart. I think it's done really well. But yes, Magneto taking over Genosha was unequivocally really bad. It was like and what this comic does is make the argument that while obviously what he's doing is wrong, it may be something that in the end creates good. But it feels like it's grappling with a lot of the questions that people had about very real political conflicts in this moment.
Well, like it one of the biggest things that I think is interesting when I read this is how it acts as or how it uses other state governments to say, to like force power changes and things like that. Because the UN sends the Avengers, who just say, "Yeah, sure, we'll go overthrow." And
the Avengers just go, like literally.
When people say the Avengers are cops, it's because sometimes they do cop stuff. It's just
it's just a fact. Look, here's what happens in this story. Literally, what happens in this story in 1999 is the Israeli ambassador to the UN, the chief judge lady in charge of the fictional version of The Hague in Marvel Comics, and the Soviet ambassador to the UN, or I guess it is now Russian by this point, it's late 90s. So the Russian ambassador to the UN, who is like an ex-KGB military guy, call the Avengers on behalf of the UN and say, hey, we need you to go invade a sovereign nation. and
we gave them the sovereignty. We put this guy in power. But
I mean, how does
that's
any
history
state get made in but not just history. That's what the UN did in 1948, for example. So the idea that they said it's a sovereign state, but they're actually now going to subvert it because they have their own game and this and that. They're sending the Avengers to support the insurgent rebels who they are funding and providing weapons to within Genosha to try and kill Magneto. Like, they seeded Magneto as a puppet to try and assuage the Magneto War situation, but now are trying to kill him from the inside using covert operatives who they have embedded in resistance groups.
This is a comic that is punching above its weight class in my view. Like, it's
the dark
doing a lot
seduction
of
the title is Magneto trying to tempt Lorna to become like him.
Yes.
But the dark seduction that's actually occurring overall is not a seduction of Magneto or of Polaris. It's the game Aldous Huxley, a character who, by the way, never appears again, except in like a background cameo on Genosha.
Yeah.
There, presumably died in the attack by Cassandra Nova. But frankly, I could see her. Like, she'd be a fun one to bring back.
Huxley's around when anyone wants to use her.
Whenever anyone wants to grab her. And Fabian, if you're listening, you should revisit this character because she's really good. This comic is mostly about her playing Israel, the Russians, The Hague, the UN, and Magneto all against each other while enlisting the Avengers to serve her purpose and making a pact with Fabian Cortez, but managing to get him killed by the end so that it can't be traced back to her.
Beautiful.
And assuming
Love that
essentially complete control over the UN and therefore the United States' direct contact with Genosha going forward as a member of the cabinet on Genosha herself.
And all she had to trade away from that is giving Magneto, who at this point is a terrorist, your world leader, going to threaten the entire world, giving him even more power.
Giving him all his powers back because his powers have been all fucked up because of reasons. Don't worry about it. It's not relevant right now. But the point is, the big thing that happens in this story, this is spinning out of the 12, truly terrible X-Men comics.
Oh my gosh.
And it's such a shame because the 12 plot is so fun and then it ends like that. And you're like, fuck. That's why I still choose to believe that the Quiet Council of Krakoa were the actual 12 and that like someday we can piece that together and it'll like we have to, because this was not it. Let's be very real. But the point is,
that's just they were just wrapping it.
No,
all
it's
up.
not an Alan. I love Alan Davis, and I don't blame him for anything with his name on it in the years 1999 or 2000 coming out of that X-Men office. I just don't. And guess what? The art is beautiful. He was an emergency.
Alan Davis's
substitute.
art.
Yeah. Honestly, I think Lionel Francis Yu does pretty good stuff on that too.
Agreed. Yes, I wanted to draw a distinct line between those comics and then this comic that has Roger Cruz art.
Yeah. Right.
I asked the question to Joe Madureira.
I was going to say it's very post Joe Mad. This comic, yeah.
Roger Cruz is the guy that you get on a comic when Joe Mad is trying to breed Chocobo so that he can go and get the Knights of the Round summons.
Gotcha.
Like that's exactly what Cruz is.
I'm sorry,
that's what he's
doing. JRPGing right now. He is knee deep in Suikoden 2, and so you need to get Cruz on this issue. And I respect that. I was too, girl.
Locally, that was called Suikoden. I didn't know what it was until later, and now I'm just laughing. Like they were like a play in terrible like boathouse clubs kind of thing.
That's
locally.
Great, though. That's a great name for a band. And the remasters are coming out in just a couple weeks, and everybody should play Suikoden 2. It's the best JRPGs of the '90s, and you heard it here first. Play them.
Listen. I'm going to take your word for it. I'm past my JRPG time in my life. I can't.
Well, you
I can't
have
drop
children.
50 plus out. Yeah,
that's fine.
That's too much of a commitment. I can't do that.
No,
anymore.
I wouldn't be JRPGing with a child. I'm single income, no kids. I can JRPG if I want to.
Beautiful. Love that.
But point is, yes, that the 12, this in the 12 story, 2 of the 12 were Magneto and Polaris. Because they represented the North and South poles. Polaris, presumably the North Pole, hence Polaris. And the South Pole, which is Magneto, or famously in the story we just talked about before this, Zaladane. They represent the 2 different magnetic poles of the Earth. So with Magneto's powers all fucked up, he has been using Lorna as essentially a battery for his power. At this point in history of these characters, Lorna is not his daughter, which is important to this comic, where she's very much not, because his actual biological children,
like a kinment to him.
Right, because he's the only person who understands her, and her birth parents died when she was a child, and her adoptive parents didn't tell her she was adopted, so as far as we know, she hasn't spoken to them since 1968 or whatever. So, because she was pissed.
How do you feel about Lorna's design in this comic?
I love it. I love this look.
She's got a lot of weird points. Like, she looks like
the tits are insane, but like that's because the art is that way. Like, Joanna Cargill is in like a padded vest and her tits are also insane. But I would say, look, it's a little bit Class Comics Lady Death vibes. Like, yes, but like it's full body covered, which I like, as opposed to those designs. It's definitely, I mean, she looks scary. She looks evil.
You're does.
Like, it makes you think, wow, has Lorna been dark seductioned? I mean, like, that is sort of it's
got like the spikes from like the Eric the Red Polaris costume that he gives her.
And the skull motif from the original costume in the first story.
What I don't like about it is the hair. I
like the fog
Larry
hair.
Stroman. I like the like callback to like how Stroman would do her hair kind of crazy and wildly.
Stroman curls with Polaris that go all the way out. Like, that's my favorite with her, but I like the way that this evokes it.
I think the fog hair is specifically a mistake for this story because you already have Amelia Vogt there. So every time I see
who's
fog,
a mist person, right? Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I'm like, wait, is that Vogt? Nope. This is Polaris again. Okay, wait. Gotta figure out where we're at.
I just I'm a sucker for a hair power effect.
Right.
I will say I find Wanda's a little odd, the new one, but I always like it on like Starfire or Megan or like any of those characters where, like, they fly and their hair does a thing. And this is a good one, I think. I like it in this moment where she's like, because what this story is about for Lorna is Magneto is teaching her how to like directly commune with the magnetic fields of the earth in a way that she never has before. And in return, she is faking his powers for him to impress the people of Genosha because he's been depowered somewhat. He still has them, but like he's been weakened significantly. So he needs her and to be able to draw on the magnetic force she generates to use his powers. This story revolves around a mysterious device hidden in Carrion Cove. This will later be revealed, I believe, to be the Sugarman machines that the Gene-Engineer was using. I don't like the Sugarman being involved in Genosha, but whatever. The point is that it's high-tech stuff that Magneto can use to restore his powers. So this is the last bastion of the Resistance, because the Resistance Genoshan humans who were part of the apartheid government know that this like high-tech alien technology that they were using is buried in this facility. So it ends up in a knockdown drag-out between the Avengers and the Acolytes, but also the Acolytes and the Acolytes, because Huxley has subverted half the Acolytes via Fabian Cortez.
It gets into a big punchy fight.
It's a big punch 'em up. The interesting thing the interesting stuff that's happening is Lorna having this crisis of conscience, because this is right after Alex has died, apparently, at the end of X Factor.
He gets blown up by a plane. He's actually in Mutant X.
It's a time warp. Right, don't worry about it. It's in another dimension, but it's fine. But he's in another dimension that's all about him and Maddie. It's not about him and Lorna. So like what Lorna's going through in this moment really is the same thing he is, which is I think they've decided these characters don't need to be paired anymore. Let's try to do something different with each of them, which I always think is better for both characters, to be perfectly honest.
Yes. They should. Yes.
It's over. It's done. It's dusted for me. But the thing that I like about this is the dynamic that is now so bizarre because they've flipped it exactly with all the fucked up retcons with the twins, because the whole point of the twins is that Magneto did not raise them. He was just their biological father who they hated. And Lorna here is like the daughter surrogate that he's taken in and is teaching, but she isn't his biological daughter.
Right.
And that has now been reversed to where the roles now in the present of Marvel are the twins were his adopted children that he raised, but that isn't what happened in the comics. And meanwhile, Lorna is his biological child who resents him. So it's just interesting to read this comic where those dynamics
trying to figure out everyone's deal for a while around Magneto.
I think that my sense is that someone is refusing to let them just undo it and make them Magneto's children again, whether that's IP management, corporate, editorial. I don't know what level that's happening at. It seems like it's happening somewhere because of MCU stuff or whatever.
Freeze it in amber and say, this is what it is. Can we just live with one thing for a while?
I think that if you're assuming that to be the case, they've resolved it in the most satisfactory way possible. It's just not a way that actually gels with the earlier comics. But going forward, it's fine because what matters is that there is kids, and we just need that to be acknowledged. So let's do it however we can do it.
They've all got relationships, and that's what this comes down to.
The dynamic between the three of them. This is the most that Lorna and Wanda ever interact in any comic until very recently. And the interaction between the three of them is really interesting. This is a time when Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch were on the outs with each other. So there's already a tension between them. And then, because he has left the Avengers to come do this stuff on Genosha to try and keep their father in line. But so this is a story about Wanda and Pietro. I mean, Wanda's already accepted this, but Pietro accepting that even though he is their father, he will never, ever give them what they want.
Never.
Which is like a normal, loving, paternal relationship. Or to become the better man. In this context, because this is during the Magneto must be evil edict era, that he will never become the hero that we have become, that we believe he could become. He will never meet us here. He can't do it. And that's what he has to learn in this story. It's Lorna learning that as much as she longs to feel a family connection with this man, and because she does want it, there's always part of her, whether it's with Mesmero or whether it was with Malice, these things are done to her, but there is always part of her, or when Apocalypse makes her the Horseman of Pestilence, even later than this, there's always part of her that's into it. There's always part of her that wants to just be like, you know what? You want me to be crazy? Then I'm going to be fucking crazy. I'm going to be a terrorist. I'm going to be possessed by the devil. I'm going to she's very susceptible to that kind of like Stockholm syndrome thinking.
Right. She becomes who people want her to be.
Yes, or who she believes the world demands her be. She feels a responsibility in a way that Wanda rejects always. This idea of being Magneto's daughter that was impressed upon her as like this royal heritage in her very first appearance, right? This idea that she owes something to her people, like to be something. In the ruins of Genosha, when she's dancing naked and projecting their dying thoughts out, like she becomes a conduit for the suffering of mutant kind. And that really is where she always functions at the highest level as a character, in my opinion. I think the stuff Jerry did with her was fucking brilliant. I think it's just, I think the idea of her as like a real bitch, but it's because there is this crushing insecurity in her about being a superhero, about being the daughter of one of the most infamous / famous, depending on who you ask, men in the entire world, about the entire legacy of the Holocaust pressing down upon her, and then of Genosha pressing down upon her. Like, she is fucked up and doesn't know how to cope with it. And this story is about her saying, it's enough now. Like, there is only so much. Like, because Alex is dead. She has no real connection to anyone else. She hoped maybe she'd finally found a real connection with someone or something. And
she has to accept that she has to do this on her own. She has to find herself.
Yeah, because I have to find this, but you can't show me the way, and what it really is I think the fundamental point of the tension between Lorna and Eric, Max, whatever, Lorna and Magneto.
Yeah.
And frankly, between Lorna and Zaladane, if they are sisters and if that character ever had mattered. But what Claremont, I think, was setting up. I'm going back to this because I do think that Claremont was setting up. No, but what I think is interesting is I don't think Claremont thought that they were Magneto's children when he was writing that story.
Right. They were just sisters.
Right. But when you add now that Lorna is biologically his daughter, to then imply that Zaladane also is, makes 275 now even better, because it's about Magneto thinking about the death of Anya in the pogrom and murdering a daughter he doesn't know about. Which makes it one of the best issues of X-Men of all time if Zaladane is his daughter. In fact, he murders Zaladane over a narration box of Rogue reminding him of Anya. Which is crazy. But
sometimes comics can, if that
never didn't have it.
Become happen.
Never didn't have it.
Exactly.
But so the point I just was trying to make before I got Zaladane sidetracked. It's like I've become the Mask now. Like I am now like the Stan, because it was a bit, but now it's real. But the
has a bit go that far and then have to just deal with the consequences.
I know you have never experienced that, right?
Never.
So what I was going to say is magnets repel each other, right?
Right.
Like you can't, the poles of the earth have to repel each other. Lorna and Zala, or Lorna and her father, can never actually like meet in the middle because they physically repel one another and emotionally repel one another. And here she wanted so badly to believe that he was still Claremont Magneto, who she never got a chance to know because she was Malice at the time. So there's that element to it. And because in this era he can't be Claremont Magneto, she's shut down in such a, like, he steals it from her. He violates her in a way that after she had been giving of herself freely to him and asking nothing in return but support, he takes it all for himself.
Because he's never going to love her the way that she needs to be loved. He's not going to fulfill her the way that she wants. It's
actually the exact beat with Scott and Emma from Avengers versus X-Men. Actually,
it is exactly
which I don't think the dynamic is the same, but it's that exact beat.
That beat works like, better with a
romantic couple,
father.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's more here. Yes, it's much better because I don't believe the dynamic between Scott and Emma was abusive.
No, because that doesn't make sense, but here it does.
That doesn't make sense, but here it does. There, it's her, the point that she makes, the Phoenix has turned you into this. But I more meant the part where she says, all I ever did was love you, and you take this from me. And that, I think, is the story here, and it's juxtaposed with Vogt, who has a real crisis of faith in Magneto throughout this story. That is very interesting. Yeah. That's a character I would love to see get like and they keep mentioning her in recent comics, I've noticed. Like she's gotten a name drop here or there. Conan mentioned her to Grey Crow.
I'd be interested in
that's a character I'd like. If we're back to the 90s, where the fuck
then
is
let's
Amelia
do it.
Vogt?
Yeah, give us the interesting stuff then.
Give us Vogt. That's what I want. Give us Vogt and Exodus fighting over Magneto's legacy. That's what I want. If we're doing the 90s.
Save that for your pitch docs. That's a decent.
Yeah, no, that's it. Mom, if you're listening, that's mine. Call me.
Good. So
my debut comes out next year from Dark Horse. I can't say anything else yet, but call me.
I can't wait for it, bud. I'll say.
I know. Thank you.
This is a better comic than Magneto War for sure. Do you think this is
significantly?
Do you think this is better than the other two comics that we talked about today?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to throw some out there at you and get your feel on it. Okay, I know what you're going to say about that one, so we're going to have different opinions. That's fine. That I was looking at Phoenix Resurrection Return of Jean Grey, and I know I'm going to guess that's not a comic you enjoy.
I really don't like that comic. I like Rosenberg a lot.
I think that comic starts strong and then doesn't close it out.
I think it's an impossible assignment. I think he's a very good writer. It has scenes I really like. I don't like what it does with Jean and with the Phoenix, and it's been fixed now, so it doesn't matter.
Yep. Do you like this better than 300? Is Kitty Pryde and Wolverine? Do you think this is better than that?
It's so apples and oranges for me because like it's hard to compare it is very hard for me to rank Claremont X-Men versus things so inspired by Claremont X-Men. Do you know what I mean? It's weighing 28 Days Later against Night of the Living Dead. It's like, well, but this doesn't exist without that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
that's hard for me. I know that's the bit. I know that's how the bit of the show works. Those are so different. Give me an easier one.
I'll find you an easier one. Factor X. You helped rank this the last time you were on, I think. Factor X is at 330.
You like Factor X? I think this is better than Factor X.
You think this is better than Factor X? That's interesting to me.
I'm high on Magneto Dark Seduction, though, which you might not be. I think this is one of the better late 90s X-Men comics.
I enjoyed parts of it. I get stuck on the Roger Cruz art. Like I don't think this is. I don't think that the
I don't even really like that Joe Mad style to begin with. So then I just like vibe. I'm like, it's the late 90s. It is what it is. It's not my thing, but that's fine. It's like Cerebro. Not for me, but it's fine.
I think Fabian, that's insane, and we're not getting into it.
I was joking to make you laugh.
I think Fabian.
Also, she's really been pissing me off in Marvel Rivals. I'm a little like annoyed with her specifically at this moment. It's not anyone's fault.
All I know about that game is that Galacta Daughter of Galactus is running it, and that makes Jordan White happy, and that makes me happy. That's what I know about that game.
It's a shockingly fun game. It's really fun. But yeah,
we've got. Let's see. What was I going to pick? Okay, how about this? Because I bet you have an opinion on this. The Battle World Inferno from Secret Wars.
I like this better than that.
I'm not. I'll let this go higher than I normally would.
I think a lot of people like that better than I do. And that I will say, I like Hopeless a lot. It has great moments, but I'm just the problem for me is Madeline and Ilyana stuff. I have such strong like personal opinions on it. No, but I'm granting that this makes it really impossible for like a writer to please me. You know what I mean? Like not impossible, but it's harder.
Right above that is the road trip era of X-Force, 71
That's
to 74.
better than this. That's better than this.
I'm gonna say, because I'll be honest, everything right around here. Ooh, wait, hold on. Is this better than that Alan Davis issue of Excalibur where they're dinosaurs? Where they go to the dinosaur planet?
That's not fair. That's just so talk about apples and oranges.
Man,
I don't know. Is it better? Is it better than Whitney Houston? I don't know. Like you're comparing essentially two different genres of media. You know, like
it's all X-Men. It's all X-Men. It's all X-Men.
I suppose
that's the trick. I would say I would put the Excalibur one above this. However,
I would too.
I would put this above a comic I really like, the first couple of issues of Christina Strange Generation X.
I would, and I like that comic too. I like that comic fine. I would put this above that.
I would also put it above that Alias arc that I forgot wasn't really about mutants, and we just kind of forced into a Spider-Woman episode when we did, what was his name?
God bless. That's very Claremont of you to force Spider-Woman into something.
I forgot that the arc that Jessica Drew shows up in Alias to get the MGH is not the same arc of the one where the girl pretends to be a mutant. And then we had already read it, so we were like, screw it, we're ranking it. Regardless. Such is life. It's our new 326. Hey, Connor, thank you so much for coming on. That was a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. This was fun. It was pleasant to be had. People should come check my stuff out if they like it.
Yeah, where perchance could people find your stuff?
So you can find all my stuff at connorgoldsmith.com, but you can find the podcast Cerebro at cerebrocast.com or Cerebrocast on not all socials, but many socials. YouTube, TikTok, Instagram. Instagram is really the only social media I use, but there are friends of mine manage like the YouTube and the TikTok and things like that. So I'm active on those sites. There is a Blue Sky now also that a friend is managing because people are using that website. But like the social media really
is bad
for my brain. Yeah, it's really bad. For me specifically, it's just it makes me it takes me from Lorna to like wedding dress Lorna in like a very unuseful way. But so that's all the places to find. You can find me on Instagram at Connor Goldsmith. That's really my only social media. Cerebro is available on every podcast platform that you could want it on. And we just most recently, actually, by the time you hear this, hopefully the new episode on Lalandra with Josh Trujillo will be out. But before that, it was the Very Lady Deathstrike Christmas 2-parter with Jordan Block, which was a real hoot and a half. I enjoyed that a lot.
Beautiful time. Not enough Ernest Hemingway content in that episode, but that's fine.
Yeah, I'll saving it for the Puck episode, so it'll make sense later.
Incredible.
But I think that show is. I'm sorry. I'm rambling. I'm not usually doing this. I'm usually asking the guests to do this.
Right.
This is
flipping the script,
right?
Here.
I have a Patreon because the show Cerebro, the regular podcast, usually comes out once a month because the episodes are long. They're like upwards of. I mean, this one's gonna be like 5 hours. So they're long. But I do release other stuff on the Patreon. Jordan Block and I do a monthly pop culture chat show called The Kibitz. Holly Raymond and I are going to be launching our Krakoa Revisited series, where we're going to start by looking at House of X Powers of 10 as a whole, but then we're going to go through all the characters I've covered on Cerebro and talk about their arc on Krakoa. Now that it's complete, we're not going in the exact order that I did them on the show initially, but we're pairing. We're probably going to be 2 characters each episode, and we're going to pair interesting ones to like compare and contrast. But that is really exciting. We're planning that out. I have other like new Patreon series in the works that are percolating, and there's just a lot going on over there this year.
You got a lot moving.
It's patreon.com/cerebrocast/ I just did the it's patreon.com/cerebrocast. And it's just $5 a month, and it pays
$5 a month.
This is how, and this is my job. Like, I'm doing this full time now. So every little bit helps. And otherwise, just thank you. My debut comic with artist Josh Cornell will be coming in 2026 from Dark Horse, but I can't say anything else about it. I was cleared to say that.
Look forward to it, folks. It's gonna be a good one. For us, we're gonna be here next week. If you want to find Adam, I don't know his socials. I text him. I'm not giving you his phone number over the air, though. That's insane.
Adam Rekt.
It's Adam Rekt. It's Adam Rekt. I think
Adam Reked. Like it's a pun.
I don't know.
They know if they're listening to the show. They know.
Notes. Go.
If you're listening to the show, you know.
Notes. Yeah, do that. If you want to find me, if you're going to be at the AHR Expo down in Orlando, seeing all the latest and greatest in air conditioning technology next week, go hit me up, I guess. But be cool about it, because that's my actual job. Beyond that, you can't find me anywhere. So it's either go see a bunch of HVAC equipment and maybe run into me. That's all I've got for you. But what we have
air conditioning trade show.
Listen, it is a bigger and more exciting general event.
No, run away. Go be free. Be free, please.
No, it is. I'm getting paid to be there. Or we're paying to be there and then they're paying me. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm not one of the air conditioning influencers. That's a whole other category that we're not going to get into. What we are going to get into is ranking our 1,000th comic on this stupid list that we've been doing for 7 years. We're doing that next week. We are taking it all the way back to the origins of Adam, the origins of myself, the origins of this podcast. We are diving deep into things, and it's going to be fun. I can't wait for it. Thank you again, Connor, for being on, and until next week, folks, this has been Battle of the Atom. We hope you survived the experience.
Get it!